My sister Sharon escaped with my husband Keith, leaving her dying son in my care. 15 years later, they taunted me, asking about the boy they'd abandoned to die, until he walked in as a grown man. Their faces were absolutely priceless. Can you imagine the ultimate betrayal? My own sister, Sharon, ran off with my husband, Keith, leaving me with her child, a little boy she told me was dying. But 15 years later, I watched them mock the memory of that abandoned child, right to my face, until he walked in, a thriving, confident man. Their faces? Absolutely priceless. It's been a long, winding road to get to that moment, and it all began 15 years ago, on a Tuesday that, at first, felt just like any other. I remember the familiar squeak of my car's brakes as I pulled into our driveway. It was one of those crisp autumn evenings, the air smelling faintly of rain and fallen leaves. I was bone-tired, you know. The kind of deep weariness that settles into your soul after a marathon day at the office, the kind no amount of coffee can fix. My only ambition for the rest of the night was to kick off my shoes, heat up some leftovers, and maybe just zone out in front of the TV. My sister, Sharon, was supposed to be picking up her son, my sweet nephew Kyle. She'd been leaving him with me more and more often lately. And while I absolutely adored Kyle, he was such a quiet, gentle soul, I'll admit, I was looking forward to the peaceful quiet of an empty house. My husband, Keith, should have been home from work already. I pictured him in the den, probably with his feet up, watching the sports channel. But when I turned the key in the lock, the very first thing that hit me wasn't the smell of dinner, or the blare of the TV. It was the silence. Not a peaceful quiet, no. This was a heavy, hollow silence that felt utterly wrong. The air inside was still, cold. No TV. No cooking smells. Nothing. Keith. I called out, my voice a little too loud in the sudden emptiness, dropping my purse onto the entryway table with a thud. Sharon? I'm home. Only the echo of my own voice answered me. A little knot of unease began to tighten in my stomach. I walked through the living room, my sensible work heels sinking softly into the carpet. Everything was unnervingly tidy. Too tidy. A magazine on the coffee table was perfectly squared. The remote controls lined up in a neat little row. Keith, bless his messy heart, was many things, but neat was never one of them. And that's when I saw him. Little Kyle. He was only 5 years old then, all huge, scared eyes and a mop of sandy blonde hair. He was curled up in the big armchair by the window, the one we affectionately called Grandpa's chair. He was clutching a throw pillow to his chest so tightly his little knuckles were white. He wasn't crying, not yet. He was just watching me, waiting. My heart did a painful little flip. I rushed over and knelt in front of him. Kyle, sweetie, where is everybody? Where's your mommy? He just stared at me, his lower lip beginning to tremble. He looked so incredibly small and lost in that huge chair. I smoothed his hair back from his forehead. It was damp, like he'd been sweating. Is Uncle Keith here? I asked, my voice softer this time, trying to hide the tremor in it. He shook his head, a tiny, jerky movement. Then, without a word, he uncurled one of his little hands from the pillow. He was holding a piece of paper, folded into a tight, crumpled square. He held it out to me. I took it from him. The paper was warm from his small hand. For a second, I just looked at it. That knot of unease in my stomach. It had morphed into a cold, hard stone of dread. I knew, with the kind of certainty that defies all logic, that whatever was written on that piece of paper was going to change everything. And God, was I right? My fingers trembled as I unfolded the note. It was Sharon's handwriting. Big, loopy letters that always looked so cheerful, so carefree. But the words on the page were anything but. Brenda, I'm so sorry to do this in a letter. I know it's cowardly. By the time you read this, Keith and I will be long gone. We're in love, Bren. We have been for a while. We're going to start a new life somewhere we can be happy. I can't take Kyle with me right now. It's not the right environment for a child. I know you'll take care of him. You're better at it anyway. Please don't try to find us. Sharon. I read it once. Then twice. The words swam in front of my eyes, blurring together into a meaningless jumble. It felt like a joke. A sick, twisted prank. My sister and my husband. It wasn't possible. We were family. Keith and I had been married for 10 years. We'd had our ups and downs, like any couple, but I loved him. I thought he loved me. And Sharon, she was my baby sister. The one I was supposed to protect. My legs felt weak. I sank down onto the floor, the letters still clutched in my hand. A buzzing sound started in my ears. I looked over at Kyle, who was still watching me with those huge, solemn eyes. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the feeling in the room. He understood disaster. My mind raced, desperately trying to find an explanation. Any explanation other than the one staring me in the face. Maybe someone forced them. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. I stumbled into the kitchen, my hand shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone. I dialed Keith's number. Straight to voicemail. The cheerful, professional greeting he'd recorded for work felt like a literal slap in the face. I dialed Sharon's number. Straight to voicemail. Her giggly, sing-song message played, "Hey, you've reached Sharon. Leave a message." They were gone. Together. That's when I saw it. On the gleaming granite countertop, next to the fruit bowl, was a sheath of papers. I picked them up. The top page was a legal document, a petition for dissolution of marriage. A divorce. And there, at the bottom of the last page, was his signature. Keith's familiar, confident scroll. He'd signed it. He had planned this. The cold stone of dread in my stomach shattered, and a hot, searing rage took its place. They hadn't just left. They had plotted. They had lied to my face day after day while they planned their great escape. I thought about the last few weeks. Keith being distant, working late. Sharon, always so full of drama, suddenly serene and calm. It all clicked into place. Each memory a new twist of the knife. Little Kyle padded into the kitchen behind me. He tugged on my sleeve. "Aunt Brenda," he whispered. "Mommy and Uncle Keith went on a trip." I looked down at his innocent face, and the rage inside me dissolved into a wave of pure, gut-wrenching sorrow. How could they do this to him? How could a mother just leave her child behind like a piece of forgotten luggage? I scooped him up into my arms and held him tight, burying my face in his soft hair. He was all I had left of my family, and I was all he had. But to truly understand the sickening cruelty of what Sharon did, you have to understand the monstrous lie she told me months before she disappeared. It was the foundation for her entire escape plan. A masterpiece of manipulation built on my love for her and, more importantly, for my nephew. I remember the day so clearly. It was a Saturday in late spring. I was in my garden, trying to coax some life into my sad-looking tomato plants, when Sharon's car screeched into the driveway. She practically fell out of the driver's seat, her face pale and streaked with tears. My first thought was that she'd been in an accident. "Sharon, what is it? What's wrong?" I cried, rushing over to her. She collapsed into my arms, sobbing hysterically. "It's Kyle," she choked out between gasps. "Oh God, Brenda, it's Kyle." I pulled her inside, my heart pounding against my ribs. I sat her down at the kitchen table and made her a cup of tea, my hands shaking. Kyle was my world. If anything happened to him, I couldn't even finish the thought. Finally, after a few sips of tea, she calmed down enough to speak. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a terror that I, in my unbearable naivety, believed was real. "The doctors, they ran some tests," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He has a rare blood disorder. It's terminal, Brenda. The teacup slipped from my fingers, shattering on the tile floor. I didn't even notice. What? What are you saying? They said he has 6 months. Maybe less. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking with renewed sobs. 6 months? How am I supposed to watch my own baby die? I can't do it, Bren. I'm not strong enough. I see him, and all I can think about is that he's leaving me. Every cough, every time he says he's tired, it's killing me. I was completely and utterly devastated. For Kyle, this beautiful little boy whose life was being cut so tragically short. And for my sister, who was facing every parent's worst nightmare. I pulled her into a hug, letting her cry on my shoulder. I'm so sorry, Sharon, I whispered, tears streaming down my own face. We'll get through this. Whatever you need, I'm here. We'll get a second opinion. We'll find the best doctors. She pulled back, shaking her head. There's no point. They said it's definitive. There's no treatment. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. Brenda, I can't. I can't be here to watch it. I know it sounds awful. I know I sound like a monster, but I can't. And then she delivered the line that sealed all our fates. Could you help me with him? Just for a little while? Let me have some time to process this. I just need a break from the constant reminder. Of course, I said yes. What else could I say? My sister was falling apart, and her son was dying. I told her to bring him over whenever she needed a break. I would do anything to ease her burden. I had no idea that I wasn't easing her burden. I was becoming her escape route. She wasn't a grieving mother. She was a brilliant, cold-hearted strategist, and she had just played me perfectly. After that day, my home became Kyle's second home. At first, it was just for a weekend here and there. Sharon would drop him off on a Friday evening, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy. She'd hug me and thank me profusely, telling me I was a lifesaver. I just need to not think about it for a couple of days, you know, she'd say, her voice cracking. Just to feel normal again. And I believed her. I'd spend the weekend doting on Kyle, trying to fill his last few months with as much joy as possible. We'd go to the park, build magnificent Lego castles that covered the entire living room floor, and watch cartoons until we both fell asleep on the couch. He was a quiet, sweet boy, and he did seem to get tired very easily, which only confirmed Sharon's story in my mind. But then the weekends started getting longer. She'd drop him off on Thursday and not pick him up until late Sunday night. Then it became whole weeks. Her calls became less frequent. When I did manage to get her on the phone, she sounded distant, distracted. How are you holding up, Sharon? I'd ask, genuinely concerned. I'm fine, she'd answer, her voice flat. Just busy trying to keep my mind off things. My husband, Keith, was wonderful about it at first. Whatever your sister needs, Bren, he'd say, ruffling Kyle's hair. We're family. Looking back, his supportive act makes my stomach churn. He wasn't supporting me. He was facilitating his own affair. Every extra hour Kyle was with us was an extra hour he could be with Sharon. The unease started to creep in slowly. One evening, a friend of mine, Jessica, called for a chat. Hey, you'll never guess who I saw downtown, she said. Your sister, Sharon. She was at that new wine bar, the Grapevine. She was with a group of people, laughing her head off. She looked like she was having the time of her life. I felt a cold prickle of confusion. Are you sure it was her? Positive. She was wearing that bright red dress you hate. Jessica laughed. After I hung up, I sat in the quiet house for a long time. It didn't make sense. A grieving mother whose son only had a few months to live was out laughing at a wine bar. I tried to dismiss it. Maybe she was trying to force herself to be happy, just like she'd said. But the seed of doubt had been firmly planted. The final straw came a few weeks before she left for good. She was supposed to pick Kyle up at 6 o'clock on a Sunday. By 9, she still hadn't shown up. She wasn't answering her phone. I was frantic with worry, imagining the worst. Finally, around midnight, her car pulled into the driveway. I met her at the door, my arms crossed. "Sharon, where have you been?" I was worried sick. She breezed past me, smelling faintly of perfume and wine. "Oh, relax, Brenda. I lost track of time." She looked annoyed, as if I were the one being unreasonable. "Lost track of time? Your son is here." She turned to face me, her eyes cold. "And he's fine, isn't he? Look, I have my own life to live, Brenda. I can't put everything on hold." That was when I knew something was terribly wrong. It wasn't about grief anymore. This was something else. This was abandonment happening in slow motion, right before my eyes. And then came the night of the letter. The night the slow fade became a final, deafening silence. After the initial shock wore off, a strange kind of calm settled over me. It was the calm of the shipwreck survivor who finally realizes the ship is gone, and the only thing left to do is swim. My marriage was over. My relationship with my sister was a lie. My old life had been burned to the ground. All I had left was the little boy sleeping in the guest room, his face peaceful in the soft glow of the nightlight. I tiptoed into his room and sat on the edge of the bed, just watching him breathe. His little chest rose and fell in a steady rhythm. He looked so fragile, so innocent. He had no idea that his world had been just as shattered as mine. His mother was gone. The man he knew as his fun uncle was also gone. And he had taken a piece of my life with him. Tears I didn't even know I was holding back began to stream down my face. They weren't tears of rage anymore. They were tears for him. For this small, helpless child who had been used as a pawn and then discarded. Sharon hadn't just betrayed me. She had abandoned her own son. And Keith. Keith had enabled it. He had watched her neglect her child and said nothing, all so he could have what he wanted. In that moment, staring at Kyle's sleeping face, I felt a fierce, protective love swell in my heart. It was a love so powerful, it pushed aside my own pain. My grief was a luxury I couldn't afford right now. This little boy needed me. I reached out and gently brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. He stirred in his sleep, murmuring something unintelligible. I leaned down and whispered into the quiet of the room. It was a vow. I promised it to him and to myself. "It's okay, sweetie," I whispered, my voice thick with tears. "It's just you and me now. But I am never ever going to leave you. I will always be here for you, Kyle. Always. I promise." He settled back into a deep sleep, and I stayed there for a long time, the weight of that promise settling onto my shoulders. It felt heavy. Terrifying, even. I was in my 40s, suddenly a single woman, and now a single mother to a child the world believed was dying. I had no idea how I was going to do it. The financial strain alone was daunting. My salary was steady, but it was meant for 2 people, not one person and a child with major medical needs. There was no discussion of child support, no talk of shared custody. There was just silence, and a little boy sleeping in my guest room. But as I sat there in the dark, I knew one thing for sure. I would not fail him. I would pour every ounce of love and strength I had into giving him the best life possible, for whatever time he had left. My old life was over. My new one had just begun. The first few months were a blur of learning a new routine. Our quiet, orderly house was suddenly filled with the happy chaos of a 5-year-old. There were Lego bricks underfoot, cartoon theme songs stuck in my head, and a constant, low-level hum of anxiety about Kyle's health. I followed Sharon's instructions to the letter. She had left a note with a list of foods he would eat, a very short, very strange list. Things like strawberry jelly, bananas, and plain white bread with the crusts cut off. It's all he eats, she had snapped at me once, months before she left. Don't even try to give him anything else. He'll just throw it up. So, I didn't. I made him little plates of bananas and jelly sandwiches. He ate them, but without any real enthusiasm. And he was always so tired. He'd have a burst of energy for maybe 20 minutes, and then he'd just wilt, needing to lie down on the couch. His skin was pale, almost translucent, and he had dark circles under his eyes. Everything about him seemed to confirm the terrible diagnosis. But my gut told me something was wrong. It was more than just a feeling. It was a deep, primal instinct, a mother's instinct, I suppose. Even though I wasn't his mother by birth, I'd watch him listlessly pushing a toy car across the floor and I'd think, this isn't right. Children, even sick children, should have more spark. I started doing my own research. I spent hours online late at night after Kyle was asleep, looking up rare blood disorders. Nothing I found matched his symptoms perfectly. There were always inconsistencies. The tipping point came one afternoon when I took him to the playground. He was so excited to go on the swings. I pushed him gently, and he giggled, his little legs kicking. But after less than 5 minutes, he asked to stop. I'm tired, Aunt Brenda, he said, his voice a weary little whisper. He leaned his head against my side as we sat on the park bench, and he was asleep in minutes. That was it. I couldn't just stand by and watch him fade away. Sharon had said there was no point in a second opinion, but Sharon was a liar and a coward. I didn't trust a single word she'd ever said. The very next day, I made an appointment. I didn't go to our local family doctor. I wanted fresh eyes, a top specialist. I found a highly recommended pediatric hematologist, Dr. Evans, at the city hospital. It was expensive. I had to use money I had been saving for years, money from a small inheritance my grandmother had left me. But it didn't matter. This was more important than any savings account. I bundled Kyle up and drove us downtown. I remember sitting in the waiting room, my hands clammy, my heart thudding against my ribs. Kyle was sitting on my lap, quietly looking at a picture book. I was terrified of what the doctor would say. A part of me was afraid he would confirm my worst fears. But a bigger part of me was screaming that this was the right thing to do. I had to know the truth, no matter how painful it was. Dr. Evans was a kind-faced woman with sharp, intelligent eyes. She listened patiently as I explained the situation, stumbling over the words as I recounted the diagnosis Sharon had given me. I watched her face carefully, but it remained neutral, professional. Then she began her examination of Kyle. She was gentle and thorough, making him giggle as she checked his reflexes. She took his blood pressure, listened to his heart, and felt the glands in his neck. After she was done, she sent us down the hall for blood tests. Kyle was brave, only wincing a little when the needle went in. We waited for what felt like an eternity. Finally, a nurse called us back into Dr. Evans's office. She had the results in her hand. My heart was in my throat. Dr. Evans looked at me, her expression serious. Brenda, she said, her voice gentle but firm. I've reviewed Kyle's blood work. We ran a comprehensive panel. I held my breath, and she took a deep breath. I'm not sure where your sister got her information, but Kyle does not have a terminal blood disorder. He doesn't have any kind of blood disorder at all. The relief that washed over me was so intense, it almost made me faint. It was like a physical weight had been lifted from my chest. I started to cry, silent tears of joy streaming down my face. Kyle was going to live. He was going to be okay. But Dr. Evans wasn't finished. She leaned forward, her eyes full of a mixture of sympathy and anger. However, she said, her voice dropping lower. Kyle is a very sick little boy. His results are alarming. He's suffering from severe malnutrition. He's anemic and has significant vitamin and mineral deficiencies across the board. The room went cold again. Malnutrition. She looked at me pointedly. This boy isn't dying, ma'am. He's starving. The word hung in the air between us. Starving. And in that instant, every piece of the puzzle clicked into place. His fatigue, his pale skin, his lack of appetite for anything other than sugar and starch. It wasn't a disease. It was neglect. Criminal neglect. The relief I had felt just moments before was replaced by a white-hot, blinding rage. Sharon hadn't just lied to me to get rid of her son. She had been systematically starving him. Whether out of ignorance or pure malice, I didn't know. And frankly, I didn't care. She had actively harmed him, endangering his life with her selfishness and deceit. That 6 months to live story wasn't just a lie to get me to take him. It was the potential outcome of her own parenting. My path forward was suddenly crystal clear. I was no longer just his caregiver. I was his rescuer. My consultation with a lawyer about the divorce papers Keith had left would have to wait. My first and only priority was to undo the damage my sister had done. I was going to save this little boy. I was going to give him a life, a real one, full of health and love and everything his own mother had denied him. The years that followed were a testament to the healing power of love and chicken soup. Literally. Armed with Dr. Evans's diagnosis and a detailed nutrition plan, I declared war on malnutrition. My kitchen, which had mostly been used for reheating takeout, became my command center. I bought cookbooks. I watched cooking shows. I learned the difference between a simmer and a boil. I became an expert on nutrient-dense foods. Every morning, I made a nourishing broth, filled with vegetables, chicken, and herbs. At first, getting Kyle to eat was a battle. His body was so used to junk that real food tasted strange to him. He pushed the spoon away, his little face wrinkling in distaste. But I was patient. I was relentless. I'd make a game of it. Here comes the airplane into the hangar, I'd say, swooping the spoon toward his mouth. Slowly, painstakingly, he started to eat. A sip of soup one day, 2 sips the next. I'll never forget the first time he finished a whole little bowl. He looked up at me, a shy smile on his face, a little bit of carrot on his chin. Good job, Kyle. I cheered, my heart bursting with pride. You're getting so strong. As his body healed, his spirit began to bloom. The pale, listless little boy started to disappear, replaced by a child with rosy cheeks and bright, curious eyes. We started going for short walks, then longer ones. He had energy. He wanted to run and climb and explore. One day, he was about 7. He was kicking a soccer ball around the backyard. He wasn't just kicking it. He was chasing it with a fierce determination, his laughter echoing in the afternoon air. I was sitting on the porch watching him. When he turned to me, his face flushed with exertion and joy. Watch this, Aunt Brenda, he yelled, and he kicked the ball with all his might. It sailed through the air and landed right in my petunia bed. We both burst out laughing. It was in moments like that, simple, ordinary moments, that I felt the deepest joy. This was what I had fought for. This was my victory. Sometime around his 8th birthday, he started calling me Mom. It happened so naturally, I almost missed it. We were in the grocery store, and he tapped on my sleeve to get my attention. Mom, can we get the sugary cereal? He asked, pointing to a brightly colored box. I stopped the cart and looked down at him. The word just hung there in the air between us. It felt right. I smiled, my eyes welling up. No, we cannot get the sugary cereal, I said, ruffling his hair. But you can pick out any kind of fruit you want. From that day on, I was Mom. The word aunt was retired forever. We were a family. A small, unconventional, cobbled-together family, but a family nonetheless. I never remarried. I never even felt the need to date. My life was full. Raising Kyle, watching him grow from a fragile child into a strong, kind, intelligent young man. Gave me a sense of purpose I had never known before. He played sports in high school. He got good grades. He had friends. He had a life, a real, vibrant, wonderful life. And it was the greatest gift I had ever been given. 15 years. It's a lifetime, isn't it? Long enough for wounds to scar over, for memories to soften at the edges, long enough for a 5-year-old boy to become a 20-year-old man. Kyle was in his second year of college, studying pre-med, of all things. He was living at home to save money, and our little house was still filled with his presents, his giant sneakers by the door, his textbooks piled on the dining table, the sound of his music drifting from his room. I was content. Truly. The anger I once felt toward Sharon and Keith had faded into a dull, distant ache. I rarely thought of them. When I did, it was with a kind of detached curiosity. I wondered what had become of them, what their lives were like, but I never had any real desire to find out. And then, one Saturday afternoon, the past came crashing into my present. I was at the supermarket in the dairy aisle, trying to decide between whole milk and 2%. It was a completely ordinary moment on a completely ordinary day. "Brenda, is that you?" The voice was older, a little raspier, but I knew it instantly. A cold shock went through me, so intense I felt my fingers go numb. I froze, my hand hovering over the milk cartons. Slowly, I turned around. It was her. Sharon. She was heavier, with fine lines etched around her eyes and mouth. Her once bright blonde hair was now a brassy, faded color. But it was unmistakably her. She was smiling, a bright, cheerful smile, as if we'd just seen each other last week at a family barbecue. "Sharon," I said, my voice stiff, foreign in my own ears. "I knew it was you," she chirped, stepping closer. A cloud of cloying, sweet perfume enveloped me. My mind went blank. All the things I had imagined saying to her if I ever saw her again, the angry accusations, the tearful questions, they all vanished. I was just paralyzed. Just then, a man walked up and put his arm around her shoulders. It was Keith. He was paunchier now, his hair thinning on top, but he had the same smug grin I remembered all too well. "Hey, what's going on?" he said. Then his eyes landed on me. His grin widened. "Wait a minute. Brenda?" "Well, I'll be damned." He looked me up and down. A flicker of something, pity, contempt, in his eyes. "Well, look at you, Brenda. Time hasn't been too kind, has it?" I clenched my teeth so hard my jaw ached. The paralysis broke, and that old, familiar rage, the one that had been dormant for so long, came roaring back to life. How dare they? How dare they stand there smiling and joking after what they did? After they blew up my life and left a child for dead? They stood there acting as if nothing had happened, as if 15 years of silence and pain could be wiped away with a cheerful greeting in the dairy aisle. I found my voice. It came out low and dangerous. "What do you think you're doing?" Sharon actually laughed. It was a light, tinkling sound that made my skin crawl. "Oh, come on, Brenda. Don't be like that. It's been 15 years. Aren't you happy to see us?" "Happy?" I was speechless at her audacity. Seeing the look of pure disgust on my face, she just smirked. "Don't be so mad," she said, waving a dismissive hand. "Let bygones be bygones. Besides," she added, her eyes glinting with malice, "aren't you glad you got to spend all that time with Kyle? It must have been nice for you, having a kid around. Gave you something to do, right?" My blood ran cold. She was trying to frame her abandonment of her own child as a favor to me. Keith chuckled beside